Gyrish Nation, welcome to the show. The Notre Dame Fighting Irish come up just short, losing 27-24 in a week one opening classic down in Miami. Mike, let's dive right into the game. This one certainly was a punch in the gut. Endy was there. It was competitive. We battled. We grinded. We come up short. And boy, if you go and read, the text threads with friends and family, if you go look on social media on X or different social media platforms, felt like it got really negative out there. A lot of negativity on the coaching staff, on the offensive and defensive lines. Notre Dame secondary, I think, got a lot of flack. Felt very much like a sky is falling moment for the Notre Dame fan base, despite playing really, really well in a top 10 matchup on the road, hostile environment. Let's just start with our vibes, our reactions. How you feeling about this game overall?
I'm with you on it. Living through the reaction from fans on Twitter, fans that are friends and family. I was getting texts throughout the game that the season was over when we were down 2 touchdowns. And I had to remind them we were in this exact stadium against Penn State, and things were looking pretty dire. And then we rallied to win. We didn't rally to win this one, but we did end up coming back and making it a game. I mean, I think obviously the result is very disappointing. This felt like a game that we could have won. But for me, a big takeaway is that all of our goals for this season are still in front of us. Obviously, there's a much more narrow, margin of error. But the other big takeaway was Carr, who is the big unknown coming into this. I thought it was a great inaugural performance, and it gives me a lot of hope of where this team could be at the end of the year. I think the resilience that we showed, that's another big takeaway. That's been a staple of a lot of Marcus Freeman led teams. This is a team where even when things were working against us, we didn't cave, we didn't quit. So I think as you look over the course of a season, these are things that give me confidence that we can still get where we hoped that we would get. It's not a guarantee, it's tougher, but there are certain elements to this team's DNA that I like. As for the game itself, it's as we called out in the interviews with the Miami podcast. It was won and lost in the trenches. We knew Miami has been building their program in the trenches, which is a formula that Notre Dame has utilized as long as I've been a fan of the team. We knew they had one of the better offensive lines in the country. We knew that their defensive line was, I would say, solid to good. But even considering all that, they performed on both sides of the line better than I expected. I think Notre Dame got pushed around and beaten much more than I could have possibly expected. So you combine that, frankly, the Miami offense looking more like late season form than I expected, a couple fluky turnovers, and then also our offense being on training wheels essentially for the first 2.5 quarters. That's why we lost. And even with that, that's the thing. Even with all that, it was very close, and it was a game that we could have won.
I'm coming out of this game. Look, I went into it really confident. I thought Notre Dame was going to go in there and win by a couple of scores. And I think that was more about my misread of this Miami team than it was my misread of Notre Dame. I was really impressed with the year-over-year improvement in Miami's defense. I thought there was a big opportunity for them to have, the classic lot of transfers, new quarterback, new coordinator, new scheme. I just thought there was going to be opportunities for Notre Dame to take advantage of that. And credit Miami, there wasn't. They played really sound defensive football, and there weren't those opportunities. So that makes it a 50-50 game. Vegas had it right. There's a reason we had a 55% chance to win this game. It's basically a coin flip, and we lost the big moments. Actually, to me, this game wasn't about the trenches. We'll get into both of these themes in more detail. I didn't think this was about the trenches. I thought Notre Dame held their own there. I think there's a lot of Miami fans walked away from this game thinking, man, sure, our offensive line protected Carson Beck, but where's our run game? We shut down Jeremiah Love, but also Notre Dame just didn't run the ball that much. We weren't really sacking or disrupting or creating havoc on CJ Carr. Sure, we were generating some pressure, but CJ Carr we weren't really getting after CJ Carr until the final drive of the game. So I walked away from this game thinking the key theme for me was big moments. The 2 turnovers didn't translate into Miami points, but it really dictated time of possession. It really took away a couple scoring opportunities for Notre Dame. and then third and long. We'll get into this one for sure in more detail, and we'll break down some film on YouTube for our viewers. I thought in a 50-50 game, we gave up 4 third down conversions that were in long yardage situations that led to 2 scoring drives and the turnovers. And in a 50-50 game, it's hard to overcome those swings. But that's what happens in top 10 matchups with 2 really good football teams. So I actually walked away from this game with even more of a swagger, of, I think we got our quarterback, more of a swagger that I love our depth on the defensive line, more of a swagger that it's like, gosh, just wait till Jeremiah Love and Jadarian Price get going in a better game flow. That was just kind of a weird game flow with the turnovers and the conservative play calling to let CJ Carr settle in. Like, that feels like some easy growing pain. So I walked away thinking, yep, we lost the big moments, and that happens in big games. And we got a lot of things that we can build on where I think, as you said, every goal is still there in front of this team. But Mike, let's dig into the trenches. Let's start on the offensive line. Curious if you walked away, what, maybe I'll ask both of us this question. What's the one biggest reason for concern you saw in this game? What was the one biggest reason for optimism coming out of it? And I'll lead that off with, Pro Football Focus. Eyes don't lie. I think there's a lot of negativity about the offensive line play in this game, and it's warranted. The Pro Football Focus grades, especially in pass protection, were abysmal. It was not a well graded out game for the Notre Dame offensive line. But double clicking beyond that, where did we have the biggest issues, cause for concern? What makes you think, you know what, though, there's a reason, like, this is game 1. It could look a lot better from here.
Yeah, I'll start with the concern, because I think that was kind of more of the key for the game, and then we can kind of end it with a little bit of optimism. So yeah, you mentioned it, Brett. Like, the group graded out very poorly. Craig, our center, is the only one who had a grade of 70, which is a grade that indicates an above average starter. Everyone else was in the low 60s to high 40s. Pressure was a major factor. So Carr, when he dropped back, he was pressured 28% of the time. But like the key caveat here is that we called 11 screens in this game. So when you consider that, it actually looks quite a bit different. So if you're looking at plays where there really is an opportunity to pressure the quarterback, and it's not just like a quick conservative throw like a screen, the pressure rate actually looks quite a bit different. So exclude throws like that, pressure rate was 42%. So they were really, really struggling with pass protection. Truly atrocious pass blocking grades. Lambert had a grade of 2, Knapp 13, Absher 30, Wagner 38. Honestly, I can't recall a game with such low pass blocking grades. One caveat I do want to make here about Knapp, because Knapp is certainly getting a lot of criticism I've been seeing in the media and social media, but he did have cramps, and so he was out for a big chunk late in the game. And I would suspect that those cramps were bothering him before he actually came out of the game. So I look at that with a little bit of a grain of salt. It's probably lower than how I'd expect him to play the rest of the year, but even that aside, the pass protection was really tough. We held up, I think, a bit better against the run, but as you said, Brett, we just weren't running the ball as much, just based on what the Miami defense was kind of giving us, and also we were playing from behind for a big chunk of the game, so that just limits the opportunities you're going to have to run. But when we did run, it definitely was not a disaster. I think we did okay there. Not great, certainly not great, but we did okay. So I think if you're looking at the line's performance, like, these are the qualifications you want to make. I think one other reason for optimism I'll mention here is that in terms of the actual havoc that Miami generated, it wasn't as much as you would think. So we only had 3 sacks allowed, but only 1 until the final drive in desperation mode, and that's when we were working truly with a patchwork offensive line. We had I mentioned the cramps from Knapp. But truly that was not an ideal situation. And we had Prescott in, who's someone who hasn't really played at all, and not a surprise Miami was able to take advantage of that. So I would say even with this high pressure rate, and certainly Carr gets some credit here as well, we didn't make too many mistakes, too many negative plays. The ones that did happen, though, they did tend to be more notable, right? There are those sacks at the end. There was like the interception. So there's certain ones that were very memorable, but overall, in the grand scheme of things, it wasn't like Miami was harassing us and pushing us back every single play. So I think it's important to have that perspective here. As we dove in, like certainly there are causes for concern here, but there are other aspects of this that maybe were not quite as bad as I was expecting when I dove into the data. And then I'll hand it back to you in a second, Brett. But I guess if you're looking for another reason for optimism, I know I was only supposed to keep it to one. Our best offensive lineman is Charles Jagasaw, in my opinion, and we're going to get him back hopefully in the next few weeks. And so I think you look at one of those negative, blocking grades, and one of those will become you put Jagus on, and then I think that immediately becomes one of the better grades that you're going to have. So I think you have that element of Jagasaw coming back. You have the other element of like this line, which in theory should be very talented. They didn't show it week one, but they should gel more. So I think there's still is reason to believe that this offensive line can become an effective unit.
Yeah, my reason for concern is specifically Emil Wagner, captain on the team,
Yep.
our highest graded guy last year. He's the one that I was, most disappointed in. Gave up 4 pressures in this game, the most on the team. Um, to really, across the board, this wasn't like one guy. I think it's easy to pick on Anthony Knapp, a lot of negativity there on social media, but I thought Wagner, your highly touted blue chip recruit, your captain, the guy that had the most playing time last year, that was concerning for me, that going up against an elite defensive, edge rush tandem that Miami had. And I'll admit it, I thought we were going to dominate here. I said it in the preview. Credit Miami rushers, though. Bain was an absolute force to be reckoned with in this game. It gave me flashbacks to trying to deal with JT Sawyer of Ohio State and the Penn State tandem as well. It didn't go well up front. On the other hand, the one thing that I will say, though, is it wasn't quite like Miami was blowing us off the ball. We ran for 4.7 yards per carry rushing, which in these top 10, top 20 matchups, that's pretty darn good. When you see Notre Dame get to 6 yards per carry throughout the year, well, that's because we're just, blowing through the Miami of Ohio's of the world and the Purdue's of the world. But in these big matchups, if you're over 4 yards, that's doing pretty good. In fact, Miami was under 3.5 yards per carry in this game. That included 2 yards per rush before contact. That's pretty darn good push if we're getting 2 yards downfield before our ball carriers are getting hit. Just for comparison, Miami on offense, they only had 0.6 yards before contact. So if you just compare those two, our offensive line was generating 3 times the push that Miami was able to generate against our defensive line. I think that surprises a lot of folks because you look at the pressure stats. Notre Dame didn't generate pressure. Miami did generate pressure. So our pass blocking is really where we were let down. Our run blocking, though, looked pretty darn good. And honestly, that's a similar theme that we had last year. Last year, Notre Dame graded out really poorly in pass blocking, or I'd say average in pass blocking, and graded out really well in run blocking. I think we continue to see that theme. And so I take this to be more flow of the game for the lack of touches for Love and Price. I view that kind of more as a one-time thing of, again, conservative play calling early, combined with then getting down late, needing to rely on the passing game. I think that's what leads to the lack of carries. But when we were rushing, we were pretty successful at 4.7 yards a clip. So with that on the offensive line, we touched on this already. Really, Mike, a lackluster performance in terms of points on the board really until our last drive of the third quarter. So for about the first 2.5 quarters, only 7 points, 2 turnovers in there. One of those late in the fourth, only gave up 3 points off of those. But I thought more importantly, took away chances to score. They took away, it's not that, yes, our defense came through and kept Miami off the scoreboard, but it also limited our possessions because they happened so early. I think they were both on the second play of the drive. And so they really took away scoring opportunities in a game where Miami had 3 or 4 really long drives. At one point, I texted the group. It almost felt like we were playing Navy of just limited scoring opportunities. And I thought that was pretty crucial to have those drives go against us so early on in the possession. A lot of chatter about Denbrock's game plan in this one. What were your thoughts, and maybe double click when for our listeners, when we're saying conservative play calling, what do we mean by that? What were we seeing, especially early in the game?
Well, I think the one type of play I could point back to that I already called out was screen passes, and short throws, just the types of plays that uh, are very quickly developing. You don't have like a long developing play action throw where you have a receiver running a deep route, something like that. That gives the edge rushers more of a chance to tee off on the quarterback. So first time starting quarterback, you want to avoid that. You want to get a lot of easy throws, a lot of quick throws, types of plays that aren't going to allow pressure to get home as easily. So, and that's a mindset for a quarterback who's making his first start ever. That's a mindset that I can't really blame Denbrock for. So that's what we mean by conservative play calling. Seems appropriate for the environment on the road. I think maybe, look, I think Carr, once he's settled in, it seemed like we could take the training wheels off. Like if you want to nitpick a little bit, like maybe we could have taken the training wheels off a little bit, but I think we're really splitting hairs there. Honestly, I think you need to play it carefully with a first time starter like CJ Carr. If you don't, if we just came out guns blazing
Mm-hmm.
early, that's how you get a quarterback who gets rattled, starts seeing ghosts, and when that happens, like frankly, you could pretty much basically be screwed. The Miami defense would know that we're not doing anything in the passing game. Just load the box, and you can just kind of pack it in. So that's the situation you're trying to avoid. I think this is the reaction we're seeing from a lot of the fan base is kind of like it's like hindsight's always 2020. I think based on the situation, based on the information we had at the time, I think calling it conservatively was the right move. But like the downside of that was that we had 2.5 quarters where the offense was extremely stagnant. And that is for sure a key reason that we lost the game. I'm not saying that. So it is a reason that we lost the game, and I'm not saying that we should have changed the play calling, but right, it's just kind of a reality of the situation, I suppose.
Uh, to build on that further, watching the game, not once did I think, "Oh, I didn't like that play call by Denbrock," and I build on it for two reasons. One, you had a first time starting quarterback, but two, Miami had a new defensive coordinator who's running a much different scheme. We talked about that with the Miami Knights guy, in the preview show, coming over from Minnesota, trying to throw a bunch of different looks, a lot of exotic stuff, a lot of, different edge rushers and blitzers from different situations. In fact, in this game, they blitzed on 46% of CJ Carr's dropbacks. Well, when they're blitzing that often, it is telling you, hey, you got to get the ball out quickly and you got to run quick plays. So CJ Carr was reading that correctly. I thought Denbrock coached him up on that. Just for context, the average depth of throw when he was blitzed on those 46% blitzes was about 5.5 yards downfield. Now, that was actually a little bit longer than when we weren't blitzed, but it really just showed we were assuming a lot of pressure was coming. It did come. And because of that, early on in the game, we wanted to make it simple, make it digestible, try to give Carr an ability to deal with that until we figured out the looks. And once we then said, okay, we now kind of know what looks they're throwing, we know how to adjust. We know how to, block differently, but two, kind of get better reads. I also thought that opened up the playbook. So this was a situation where week one, you don't have any film on a defense running a new scheme. Like, sure, you can go and look at Minnesota's film from last year, but completely different personnel, talent level, etc. I thought that was really hard. And credit, I think that was advantage Miami for having that unknown. It's a little bit like that, rookie pitcher. Until the hitters get him on film in baseball and can really understand his pitching tendencies, it's advantage pitcher. But when you see him a second, third, fourth game, that's when you kind of figure out, are those rookie pitchers for real or not? Here, I felt like that took us a while, but we made the adjustments. And then the second thing is we talked about the offensive line getting blown off the ball. And it's like, well, if Wagner and Knapp are going to be consistently beat in pass protection, you got to keep the short throws going. When Miami was able to generate 42% pressure rate on non-screen dropbacks, that's going to limit the playbook for Denbrock. Like, there's not a lot you can do if your left and right tackles are getting beat one-on-one. And so I thought combination of poor pass protection, new defensive coordinator with a scheme we didn't have film on, and a first-time starting quarterback, I thought Denbrock did everything we could. Again, I think CJ Carr was sacked only once until the final drive. I thought the 2 turnovers were fluke and frankly poor receiver play, not on Carr. Like Denbrock did enough to put ND in a position to put points on the board. We came up short in a big game. Maybe a related question though, Mike. We haven't talked about this yet, and it's one that I think is getting a lot of scrutiny and should. Love, Price, and Greathouse, arguably our 3 best skill position players coming into the year, combined for just 20 touches. How do you think about, the lack of touches for those 3 guys?
Well, a lot of this comes down to, as we hinted at before, just what Miami was giving us, and also we were playing from behind, so that also impacts what we're doing. But a staple of Denbrock's offense is the RPO. So essentially, what the QB is doing here is they read the box. If it's heavily set up to run, you've got a quick passer that you go to, and frankly, that's why we saw a lot of wide receiver bubble screens against Miami. Obviously, we tried one too many. They totally blew up that one and made us pay big time. But part of that is, it didn't get blocked well, and there were some fluky deflections, and they got the interception. So interestingly, I do think, the other line of thinking though is that, okay, hey, look, someone like Jeremiah Love, so good that you got to like force it a bit. And so maybe there could be some line of thinking to that. But if you're trying to explain why the game developed the way that it did, like what was the coaching staff reacting to, why there were fewer touches, that's why. It's because we were playing from behind, and because in these RPO concepts, Miami was they were loading up their defense in a way where the read would tell you not to run the ball. In terms of their play, look, it was fine, but it was nothing spectacular. So it's like when we did actually run the ball, Brett, you mentioned like it was effective, but we weren't getting Jeremiah Love wasn't ripping off like an 80-yard run or anything like that.
In fact, CJ Carr was the most effective runner in this game.
It was those QB runs. That was one element that I was not expecting to be effective. It was actually pretty effective. We had that one stretch where Jadarian Price was ripping off a few runs, and actually the offensive line blocking, as an aside, was actually pretty good on that drive. But that aside, the run game was like effective, but it wasn't explosive. It wasn't like something where you felt like you had to do it. And when you're playing from behind and the defense is basically giving you reads that say pass the ball, that's why these guys aren't getting the ball as much. For Greathouse, that's a bit of a different question. So that was someone who we certainly have high hopes for this year, and he was just very quiet this game. So that'll be something to watch. I think he's a player that has the talent to show what we saw at the end of last year, but obviously not a good sign for him to basically be completely missing for this game.
So I'm going to, for the first time ever on Geirish Talk, with YouTube now being kind of up in full swing and some better technology, we're going to do some film breakdown. So if you're following along on our podcast, I'll spell it out here, so hopefully it makes sense even if you're not seeing the visual. But if you're on YouTube, I'm going to show back-to-back plays. It's the play before the interception and then the interception. And so again, post-game, Freeman said, and correctly so, look, the reason why we weren't running a lot is because Miami was stacking the box. And on all of our run looks, we also have a pass option. Quarterback needs to read the defense. And if they're stacking the box, you go to the quick pass. And the reason you go to a quick pass, by the way, is because your offensive linemen don't know this. They're in run block. If they get too far downfield, you have an ineligible lineman. So you can't really run long developing plays. You've got to have quick hitters. And so almost every time Notre Dame will be running the football up the middle. If you watch, there's 2 guys that are, wide receivers will look like they're doing a bubble screen, maybe a quick out, like they're clearly running some quick pass option if the, quarterback decides not to run the football and decides to throw it. So here on this play, you'll notice if you count them, there's 4 Miami defensive linemen and 1 linebacker. The other 2, one is a linebacker, one is a nickel corner, are both playing outside the tackles. They're playing outside the defensive end. So there are only 5 in the box and then 2 to the outside. Realistically, those 2 guys on the outside, they are not in this play because they're just too far away from, in this case, Jeremiah Love or the Notre Dame running back to be effective. So there's 5 in the box. Notre Dame has 5 linemen and a tight end. So we have 6 blockers to their 5. Easy handoff, easy read for CJ Carr. He makes the proper read. If you actually notice at the top of this screen, we are showing that wide receiver screen at the top as well. But again, with the run matchup, Love basically walks his way to a 7-yard carry. I think even with my bum shoulder, I'm not sure I'd have gotten 7 yards, but I'm picking up 2 or 3 yards on this when Notre Dame has 6 blockers to Miami just having 5 guys in the box. Okay, next play. This is the critical interception here that really put Notre Dame in a tough position, down 10 midway through the fourth quarter. Same exact look for Notre Dame. One tight end, 2 receivers to the top, Malachi Fields to the bottom. But you'll notice at the start, there's now 7 defenders in the box. Those 2 guys that were previously outside the tackles moved inside the tackles. So now there's 7 Miami defenders in the box to just 6 Notre Dame blockers. Very different look. And every single time CJ Carr needs to go to the quick pass. And he does. And you'll note at the top, we have 2-on-1. Miami's got 2 corners, but one of those guys is 8 yards off the line of scrimmage in a screen play. That is Notre Dame advantage every single time. Jaden Greathouse makes a very, very poor football play here. He's the inside receiver. His job is to block that cornerback coming up that ultimately deflects this pass. And he really takes a half-hearted effort, doesn't ever really block the guy. I've watched this play now 100 times. I don't think he ever gets 2 hands on him. And Jaden Greathouse needs to be out there blocking like he's, an offensive lineman and doing everything he can to just take that guy out of the play, and just completely doesn't execute. Play gets blown up. Unfortunate deflection. It gets kicked in the air. Miami interception. Rest is history. But that's a good read by CJ Carr, a good throw by CJ Carr. Really bad execution by Jaden Greathouse. Marcus Freeman is saying after the game that in those situations, at some point, he just wants to feed the ball to Jeremiah Love. I can get behind that if we're even in the box. If we've got 6 blockers and they have 6 in the box and it's even, okay, I'll trust Jeremiah Love, like hopefully one-on-one, hopefully our line, all is assignment correct, and we're finding a gap and we're reading the zone and we're getting a positive run. But if we're outnumbered in the box, that's 7-on-6, and we have a 2-on-1 situation on the outside, you got to get the ball out to the wide receiver. CJ Carr did that. Unfortunate play goes against us. But this is where I credit Miami. A lot of different looks. Same exact play for Notre Dame, really on back-to-back plays here. Same exact look. Miami, 2 very different defenses, and then they go and execute it well. I think that's tip your hat to the defense. But it's not bad play calling. It's not bad read by CJ Carr. It's a big moment in a football game, and in a 50-50 game, this one went against us, a pivotal moment. But you can see CJ Carr making the right reads, not forcing it. I get a little nervous if now Freeman's saying, nope, like even if they're showing 7, 8 guys in the box, we're just going to run it. That kind of gives me like stubborn Brian Kelly vibes. You got to take what the defense gives you and go execute. Bummer it didn't work out in this one.
Yeah, I mean, look, this is a thought that just occurred to me. Part of this could just be he doesn't want one of his best players, Jeremiah Love, getting too discouraged, right? So kind of keep your star players happy. But look, I think if Marcus Freeman says something, I think he certainly does mean it as well. But I'm with you, and I think force feeding is never a great option. I think generally speaking, you want to give what the defense is giving to you, and hopefully someone like CJ Carr, as he develops as a passer, as our passing game gets better, teams they're not gonna load up in the box as much because we'll make them pay. And we started to see elements of that already in this game, which I think that is a good segue into our next the next topic we want to get on, and that's evaluating CJ Carr. So I'll just jump into his headline stats. 19 for 30, 221 yards, 2 touchdowns, and then he actually had another on the ground. We mentioned he was effective in the ground game, which was a surprise. We mentioned that he was not a dual threat, but had some mobility. I would say even with that caveat, he demonstrated a bit more mobility than I thought, and I thought he felt pressure pretty well too. So I think I don't want to harp on this point too much, but if one of Denbrock's goals with Carr was to make him feel comfortable, make him settle into the game, I think he certainly achieved that. We conceded a couple quarters of stagnant offense, yes, but certainly by the end, you saw a quarterback who looked comfortable, and you saw the playbook open up as well. Actually comfortable enough to where we were okay with some longer developing plays, and we were okay with Carr, seeing how he would do against pressure. And largely he did well. In terms of his grades on Pro Football Focus, he was the second highest grade on offense, 74. That's a good grade, and especially for a first-time ever starter on the road in an environment like that where he's getting harassed by a tough defensive line off the edges. That's about as good as you could hope for. Certainly beyond anything I expected. Adjusted completion percentage is 79%. His actual completion percentage, I think, was a hair below 60%. But that adjusted completion percentage is, I think, the more meaningful stat because it accounts for things like drops, which we did have, unfortunately. And then,
All three drops by Eli Raritan, by the way. I thought, he obviously had the big
yeah,
65-yard catch in busted coverage. Someone I think we were hopeful was going to have a breakout
yeah,
year. I thought tough first night for Raritan. One thing to note on that, it's clear with some injuries, we just don't have depth at defensive end. So he played every snap in this game. I'm going to look for Denbrock to maybe go to more no tight end looks, either
yeah,
spread it out with 4 wide receivers, bring a second running back in. I think we've got to do something to give Eli Raritan a break. I just don't think he's at the caliber yet to expect him to go out and have 60, 65 snaps a game. I think it contributed to some of those drops, but a tough opening night
right.
despite really the one big catch.
Yeah, Raritan's another one that, not to go off on too much of a tangent here, but certainly he was getting open, right? It's just if he didn't drop those, we're probably talking about like, oh hey, do we have an emerging star at tight end? But there is nothing more frustrating thing in the passing game for drops. So that's something that he has to rectify. So something to keep an eye on. Hopefully he figures it out. But yeah, I would agree. Like fatigue, realistically, would have to be an element if you're playing every single snap. Back to Carr. I think one other big takeaway for me, Brett, was just like when I was diving into the data in terms of like different scenarios, how he handled it, there really wasn't much to nitpick. I mean, he graded out well in clean pockets. He graded out well under pressure versus the blitz versus no blitz. He was a little bit lower on play action, but not like dramatically lower. And then, he was fine versus, on the screen passes. His average depth of target, that was something notably when Sam Hartman, or no, not Sam Hartman, maybe it was Sam Hartman, but like in the past,
Riley Leonard.
Riley Leonard, yeah, when it was Riley Leonard, that was a point that we would focus on, that the average depth of target was too low to have an effective passing offense. It was low for sure, but obviously when you're primarily doing these short conservative passing plays early, that's going to be the case. And I think what the bigger takeaway was that when you look at how Carr graded out on a different depths of throws, the longer the throw, the better he graded out. So certainly, like when we gave him the opportunity to make a tougher throw, like that's when he really played his best. So I was I was impressed just by the fact that any way I wanted to slice the data, any way I wanted to slice his performance, it looked good. He made a couple mistakes, but very limited, I would say. You called out that interception, very fluky. I'm not putting that one on Carr. Carr even mentioned, and this hopefully points to leadership for him. He even said he should have handed the ball off to Love there as his repost game. As we mentioned, I think that's debatable, but look, I think that's just like the mark of, he's willing to take accountability there. And then other plays like his intentional grounding at the end, I was also okay with that. I thought he got it to a spot to where maybe there was like some reasonable doubt whether or not they would call it. So that was something that I was okay with. I think overall,
Yeah, by the way, if he doesn't take the intentional grounding there, they're sacks. Like you might as well
yes,
try, right?
exactly.
It's indifferent between the intentional grounding and taking a sack. So, but both of those, it's like just offensive line got beat. I'm not
Yes,
sure that there's much else CJ Carr's doing
I
there.
agree. And he almost got it. I think he was pretty close to getting into a position where we don't take the sack there or get a grounding. But look, he handled the pass rush in the environment very well. A lot of poise and grit. Definitely did not look like a first time QB. Like I already feel like we can just take the training wheels off and open up the playbook with him. It seems like we'll probably have a mistake here or there, but honestly, maybe not even that many. Like it seemed like he was very well prepared. I actually like even just like running a 2-minute drill type scenario. He felt like someone who would have a handle on that. And then he also just had some just whoa plays. Like there's that no look touchdown to Gilbert. That's look, that's the type of play that you see someone like Patrick Mahomes make. That's like one of those
Little
moments.
bit of Baker Mayfield in him.
A little bit of Baker, yeah,
To quote the solid verbal.
yeah. So that's the type of play where if he continues to develop and becomes a star, we'll look back on that and people will be like, when did you feel like this guy might have something special? It's like, well, I remember that no look touchdown. That was something really, really impressive. So I think summing all that up, Great start for quarterback. That's a huge takeaway for this game. We lost, but this is a huge takeaway. I'm not going to anoint him, but I am cautiously optimistic that we might have something here.
I completely agree with everything you said. We've been shown up here on the screen his stats under pressure and also when he got blitzed and held up really well. I had two thoughts on that. One was comparing him to Riley Leonard. Riley Leonard did not take a lot of sacks. We've talked about that a lot on the show. But we also talked about Riley Leonard as a passer under pressure, maybe avoided sacks, but it was avoid sacks to like throw the ball away, throw it in the ground, like not very accurate when he had to move the pocket, not very accurate when he was getting hit. And that was a big part of Notre Dame's limitations last year. Lack of an explosive passing game was that Riley Leonard under pressure was not a productive quarterback. It was not a strength for Notre Dame. In fact, it was a really big Achilles heel. CJ Carr early on, look, it's, on a small sample size, we're talking about 10 dropbacks here, but 5 for 8, 100 yards and a touchdown under pressure. You're going to take that all day long under pressure. Similarly, we talked about one of the big limitations of Steve Angeli was not having the pocket presence to know when to get out, when to move the pocket, when to get the ball out, would take a lot of sacks, and also was very prone to strip sack fumbles. I think that was one of the reasons we thought CJ Carr might have an edge over him. Ultimately leads to Angeli transferring to Syracuse. Wish him all the best. In this game, CJ Carr did a really good job avoiding sacks until that last drive where, let's be clear, we needed to generate 20, 30, 40-yard plays down the field to try to get in a field goal position. And he's just under duress like immediately with a backup left tackle and Prescott getting beat. So all of that being said, I think if you say, how does CJ Carr elevate this offense? It's that under pressure passing game has been kind of an Achilles heel for Notre Dame, or at least a big thing holding us back from really taking the offense to the next level. CJ Carr passes the test in game one. Let's flip to the other side of the ball. I think the biggest story in this game is that it looks like Notre Dame does not have the number one secondary in the country. It looks like we sure miss not just Xavier Watts, not just Ben Morrison, but even in the nickel. We'll talk about this a little bit. Not having Rod Hurd and Jordan Clark, I think, really stood out in this game. Some key contributors last year that I think we miss how much depth that was, that we could just take for granted we were going to be solid. And I thought in a big way, though, tip your hat to Miami, replacing their top 6 receivers and Heisman finalist, number 1 overall pick in the draft, Cam Ward. Again, I was confident thinking they were going to have some growing pains, and their offensive coordinator, Dawson, quarterback Carson Beck, some new contributors like Malachi Toney and CJ Daniels. I mean, they just picked up right where they left off. And look, it's game 1. Who knows what this team looks like over the course of 12 games, but at least early on, Miami looks like there's a reason they were the number 1 offense in SP Plus last year. It looks like another top 3, top 5 unit. So, first things first, I want to tip the hat to Miami. It looked like an elite offense out there. And Notre Dame, wasn't out of position, wasn't blowing coverages, but we had some young guys get beat. And we had Christian Gray get beat on a few. And so, I'm curious, Mike, how you grade out our secondary. And then I'm going to go into, another film analysis specifically on the CJ Daniels touchdown. But my overall kind of more gut reaction to watching this game was tip your hat to Miami's offense, but certainly not that lockdown secondary Notre Dame fans came to just expect last year.
Right. We had the number 1 secondary by a lot of metrics last year. And you lose someone like Xavier Watts. I'm not even going to say you lose Benjamin Morrison, because we really didn't have him last year for the most part. But you lose someone like Xavier Watts, who's one of the top players in the country last year. And if you're not replacing him with someone of that caliber, you're going to have a drop back, a drop off. And that's exactly what we're seeing. So I think Schuler, played okay, but we weren't getting impact safety play for sure. I think that's a fair thing to say. And then at the corner position, Leonard Moore, look, I still think he's an All-American. Didn't play his best game, not horrible, but certainly I wouldn't say he played at like the level that we're necessarily accustomed to with him. Gray, And then Gray got unfortunately beat a couple of times. Uh, there's the one where he got the pass interference, which heads up play for him. He did trip the guy to keep it from being a touchdown. And then one thing with Gray that I do like is he does respond. Like he doesn't stay rattled. The very next play he had actually a very nice pass breakup, but overall certainly not the best game by Moore. Certainly not the best game by Gray. We weren't getting that impact safety play that we've been accustomed to, and yeah, that nickel spot. I think we kind of just assumed that Devontae Smith or whoever was in that spot would just kind of resume the high level of play, and we weren't exactly getting that. But so I think you take that. And I don't want to overreact because I think certainly Miami's receivers made some incredible plays. There's obviously that one-handed catch that we're going to talk about in a bit, but I think part of this is Miami's offense, their passing game did not look at all like a unit that had just been, pulled together last minute. They looked like an offense that was in late season form, knew exactly what they were doing. It looked like they were well in tune with their offensive coordinator. The coordinator was putting them in when they were in challenging positions. They had good play calls that they dialed up. So I think it's both of those things. I think it's credit to the, as you said, credit to the Miami passing game. Beck certainly looked like an experienced veteran quarterback who looked more like the first round pick that he's been described as in the past, than the guy who's floundered in big pressure situations. And then it's our secondary stepping back. And the question is, how much of a step back is this? Because again, this is a tough test. It certainly was a tough test for the secondary. We're certainly not the number one secondary, but are we still going to be like more of a top 10 secondary unit, or are we falling even further back than that? So that's really the question that's kind of floating around in my mind.
Yeah, I thought one of the other big takeaways here too is just figuring out the rotation. I mean, Christian Gray, Leonard Moore collectively gave up a 67% completion rate, gave up almost 125 yards of offense, and responsible for, according to Pro Football Focus here, one touchdown. Leonard Moore was in coverage on the CJ Daniels throw and catch from Carson Beck. Not their top performance, but not terrible. Like, they had a Pro Football Focus grade of 59 for both of them. I thought that was a little harsh. It's not like we got lit up. We gave up 205 yards passing. It's not like we got totally lit up in this game. But I thought the big thing that stood out to me, well, actually, let me pause on that. If you would listen to the media, you thought Carson Beck would have thrown for 400 yards on this offense. We gave up 205 yards against what last year was the number one passing offense in the country. We gave up 205 yards. Like, I'm going to go ahead and say, pretty good game. Like, just if you just pause and say, we were on the field a ton, they threw the ball a ton, and we gave up 205 yards. Like, I'll take that all day long. If you'd have told me before the game that, Carson Beck throws for 205 yards, how does Notre Dame do? I'd say, oh my gosh, we're going to win the game. And so I thought overall coverage was fine. What really stood out to me was Carson Dobbs early on was rotating with Devontae Smith at nickel. And Carson Dobbs, sophomore, first real, time playing. And so I'm going to give him more looks. This isn't saying I think Carson Hobbs should be benched, but played 11 coverage snaps in this game, was targeted 4 times, gave up 3 catches, 2 of them third down conversions, and they went to the tune of 17 yards a catch. Just not a great spot to be in for him. Couple of big backbreakers, including that first touchdown throw. So I thought that's one where you either got to see Carson Hobbs kind of learn from this and elevate. I didn't think he was terribly out of position. I thought it was assignment correct football, but he was consistently picked on. And so either we got to adjust that playing time or hopefully see a young guy kind of get through his growing pains, which we've seen before. Leonard Moore, his worst 2 games of his career were his first 2 games, and then turned into an elite defender for Notre Dame. So it's not to write Carson Hobbs off, but certainly something that the coaching staff is going to have to look at more carefully in that nickel spot.
And Brett, so, I think those call outs you make are, it's important to keep the perspective of, we're not saying that that they played awful, right? We're more saying that the impact unit that we have become accustomed to in the secondary, where they would just where they would just shut down whatever passing attack we were going against. That we didn't see that against Miami. But at the same time, the secondary is certainly not the reason that we lost the game. You mentioned it, 205 yards. That's there's you could never attribute that is the reason that you lost the game. It's just like, they're not going to completely make a very talented quarterback look pedestrian, like our secondary often had in the past.
By the way, if you're following along on YouTube, I'm trying to do this. I had successful shoulder surgery this week, so I've got the whole cast going. I just about almost knocked over all the recording equipment here on Garish Talk, trying to get our next clip lined up with one hand. Not the easiest way to use a computer keyboard.
Brett, I hope that's the last time you adjust your camera down below the waist.
That was above the waist, but sure. Yeah, so we got the whole shoulder contraption going on, but on the road to recovery. So for our next clip lined up, gosh, if you're listening to this without the video, please go check us out on YouTube. It'll make a little more sense. So we're pulling up here another clip of the one-handed snag by CJ Daniels. And, a lot of stuff on X and text threads I've seen and various social media of like Adon Schuler, should be benched. He's a captain and one of our best defenders. And I thought he played this pretty well here as we break it down. And B, should go and like murder and try to injure the wide receiver like it's the 1990s. As a glass half full podcast, I just got to pause and say, we don't agree with any of those takes. Make good, clean football plays. You never want to win by injuring guys, and just hate seeing that when football fans get a little over their skis and want to go see guys get hurt. And two, let's break this down. I thought this was actually really well defended here by Adon Schuler here in the secondary. So first of all, to start this play, as you watch it, watch the middle receiver go cut across the field. So first things first, Schuler sees a guy breaking deep while seeing CJ Daniels stop short there on the double move and immediately needs to drift a little over to the left of the screen to cover that. Quickly realizes that's covered and makes a great adjustment back to the ball, makes a great adjustment back to being in position here to defend this double move. Now I'm going to pause. Leonard Moore gets beat on this double move. He bites on the underneath route. Normally, I'm okay with that. This is 2nd and 3. It's a short yardage situation. Guy stops his route at the first down marker. You're taught to break on that if you're Leonard Moore. What I don't like about it is situational football. The one thing with 18 seconds and no timeouts from their own 21-yard line that can beat us, the one thing is a throw to the end zone. I would love to see Leonard Moore keep everything in front of him on this. And if he winds up giving up the easy first down, fine, tackle him. Miami's out of timeouts. They go spike the ball, kick a field goal. You live to halftime. So Leonard Moore, I thought covered it well. I mean, you can see him on this play. I know there's some separation here, but he covers the underneath, relies on his safety help. I thought Leonard Moore did an okay job on this play. Not great, but okay. Then Adon Schuler. He sees an overthrown ball and immediately takes one step drifting back thinking, I've got an easy interception. There's nothing wrong with instinctually doing that as a football player. This idea that like he's just assignment incorrect or blowing coverage because he's not staying on the wide receiver. Like this is a split-second decision. You're seeing the ball in the air and he takes one step to his left towards the right of the screen. And he's thinking, I have an easy interception. And CJ Daniels goes Odell Beckham Jr. and snags the ball out of nowhere. Like if our expectations of safeties is that we need to anticipate Odell Beckham Jr. like plays out of college wide receivers. Notre Dame fans have just gotten too greedy watching Kyle Hamilton and Xavier Watts in the secondary over the better part of the decade. I slowed this down frame by frame. It took 1.3 seconds from the time that Beck released the ball to CJ Daniels snagging it. So in those 1.3 seconds, we're saying that Adon Schuler instinctively takes a half step the wrong way, thinking he's got an easy interception, and then doesn't have time to react back to try to make a play on the receiver. I mean, I'm sorry. It's just an insane play by Miami. The best catch of week 1 in college football. Like tip your hat moment. Not every amazing play by the other team has to be the end of the world, bench a guy, what is he doing? Chris Ash is terrible. Like, where's Al Golden? Sky's falling moment. I thought this was covered really, really well, getting from his first read as the safety on the slant route back over to CJ Daniels, puts himself in a position to hopefully have a turnover. And just look, he misjudged it. He misjudged the ball in the air in a 1.3 second frame. That's football. You lost the big moment because Miami made a great play. Tip your hat. It was really a game changer, and this game wound up being the deciding factor.
Totally. Yeah, I think it's a bet that pays off 95% of the time. Honestly, maybe even more than that. I mean, that was like one of the best catches I've ever seen at the college level. You mentioned Odell Beckham. I mean, it really was a catch that was at that level. It's obviously if you have someone like Kyle Hamilton who has just world-class length, maybe he could just like reach out and like snag it with like one hand. Like he's that level of safety, but that's the Kyle Hamilton who recently signed a new contract is now the highest paid safety in the NFL. So that's potentially the best safety in the world we're talking about right now. So a bit of an unreasonable expectation to think that I think Schuler's a really good safety, but he's obviously not Kyle Hamilton. So I think that, getting into our next topic, and that's Chris Ash and his play calling. So I think he's been getting some heat. I think a lot of it is just it's a reactionary takes from fans being disappointed that we lost, which I totally get. But I don't think it's totally fair. Like I'm not saying that Chris Ash was lights out, had Miami confused all game, because obviously that wasn't the case. But I thought he did okay. And look, I mean I'll talk about this more later, but I don't think our defense is not why I would say that we lost the game. We held Miami to under 30 points, and when it's all said and done this year, very good chance Miami is a top 3 overall offense. And if you can hold an offense like that under 30 points, I think that's that'll be something that we will look back on and probably give a little bit more credit for. So and more on that point. So I think Miami, look, they ran a lot of this was they converted on very difficult situations. They ran some very good routes on third down to just man to man, including 2 fake crossers, which Brett's going to walk us through in a little bit. Ash tried to mix things up. We went zone on a couple plays. We just didn't, as we'll get into, we just didn't execute well on those. So, and then after that, there are other instances we went back man to man, and Miami, to their credit, they had a good play call that that worked against us in that man to man coverage. So it's a game of adjustments. The Miami offensive coordinator, I think, called a really good game here. I don't think Ash necessarily called a bad game. I think maybe Miami was just particularly exceptional here. So I think I do want to call out these third down conversions for Miami. So you have to double click, because it's not like Miami was converting on third down all the time. They were actually only 5 for 14. So it's not a spectacular number, but where they did do well is what I was hinting at before, is on these particularly challenging third down situations. So it's these 3rd and 7 or longer, they converted on 4 or 5 of those. Those 4 came on their first and third touchdown drives that really won the game for them. So they really came at opportune moments. They came on score, on what ended up being scoring opportunities. So I think, I think, kind of with that, like, these are such pivotal plays. But I'm going to kick it back over to you to, help walk us through some of these clips.
Yeah, so we'll go through 3 of them here, and the first one comes on their first touchdown drive. The wide receiver, Malachi Tony here, if you're watching along, you'll see him towards the top of the screen, and he's being covered by Carson Hobbs, and he starts running to the middle. He runs right to the midfield, middle of the U, right where the orange and green comes together, and immediately sprints back to the sidelines, plants his leg in the ground. Hobbs in pretty good coverage there, like he's staying with him, but gives up a yard or 2 of separation, and Tony just outruns him to the sideline. Easy pitch and catch for Carson Beck. And in man-to-man coverage, this is a great route call. This is a great route call by Dawson, with that misdirection, plant the foot in the ground, go the other way, really hard for a cornerback. Certainly a young guy like Carson Hobbs to stay with him. So I thought a really great man-to-man play call. And then it's like, okay, man-to-man's not working. They're converting some third downs. Let's mix it up. So we go zone. And we don't run a lot of zone. Notre Dame is, of course, known for their aggressive man-to-man secondary defense. Watch number 4, Jaden Osbury here. towards the top of your screen, covering the slot here on the top. And his job is to maintain outside leverage on this play. His job is to make sure that anyone in his area stays, between him and the middle of the field. So he should stay towards the sideline of that wide receiver. And the rationale for that is if this wide receiver gets to the outside of him, there's a big open space that is just too far for a safety to get to. He starts drifting his eyes. He kind of goes out of the screen here of the camera for a second, but he starts drifting his eyes towards another wide receiver that's being covered by Drake Bone on the other side, running a slant over the middle. So he starts cheating his eyes and he drifts back to the hash mark and he lets that wide receiver get to his outside. Again, way too much room then for the safety to come over and cover. Just really maybe the one busted coverage we saw all night. Where Osbury just, makes a really poor kind of form and just doesn't stay assignment correct, leads to an easy pitch and catch on 3rd and 8. Okay, few plays later, we're back in 3rd and long. This is the same drive now, and they're approaching the red zone, and once again they're gonna go back to man-to-man defense. Notre Dame's bread and butter, and you'll watch Christian Gray this time in coverage, and same thing, Malachi Toney runs that little 3-yard jab towards the middle of the field and immediately plants his foot and sprints back out to the sideline. You'll notice they're actually running the same route on the bottom of the screen with Leonard Moore as well. So this is Dawson saying, hey, I think I'm getting man-to-man, and I'm going to go back to what I think my man-to-man routes are. This one, the play, pretty poorly defended. If you watch, the running back also leaks out to the top completely uncovered. So Carson Beck had multiple options here to get, an easy first down pickup. Notre Dame with some confusion there. But again, a great call by Dawson on a man-to-man breaker. Tough spot for Christian Gray to be in, just like Carson Hobbs gets beat. Easy pitch and catch. First down. Miami goes on to score on this drive. So Ash was mixing it up. He was throwing different looks. And look, Dawson had his number. Credit Beck for making the right reads at the line of scrimmage. They executed it well. Easy pitch and catch. They convert. To your point, 5 of 14 is not a good 3rd down conversion, but 4 times in this game, 3rd and 7, 3rd and 8, and they're able to pick it up in long yardage situations. It led to their 2 scoring drives. Look, at the end of the day, I chalk this up to we're playing a top 3 offense, according to SP Plus preseason. And they scored 27 points, and they had to fight for them. These were long scoring drives. They required 3rd down execution, and that's what good offenses do. And sometimes, I know I've said this refrain a lot on this show, you need to tip your hat and credit Miami for executing here. I don't think this is bad play calling by Chris Ash. I like the play call, but they got beat. These are quick hitters. These are man-to-man breakers, and there's a reason why this is offensive sport. There's a reason why the Heisman Trophy goes to the offensive players. And in this one, Miami had Notre Dame's number just enough. Not a lot on 3rd down, but just enough. And this is breaking down some of those plays where I thought Dawson did a great job putting Carson Beck in good situations here to really win the big moments. I thought these big 3rd down moments, along with the turnovers, really the theme of the game for me. Mike, let's close out one more position group here that we haven't covered. The defensive line, I'd say similar to the offensive line, an area where there's negativity about feeling like we just weren't generating enough pressure. How do you think the defensive line, though, taken as a whole, graded out in this game?
I think it's worth a double click because from a pass rush standpoint, certainly did not perform well. Pressure stats is pretty low at 18%. Carson Beck, the pressure was not getting home to him. And we really were not disrupting what they were attempting to do in the passing game. But on the other side of the coin, I think we actually did a pretty good job defending the run. We held them to just 3.5 yards per carry. That's pretty solid, especially against an offensive line like Miami's that's touted as one of the best in the country. So I think I don't want to just write them off as a weak unit. I think they held up well against the run. I would have liked to have seen more in the pass rush. I have reason to believe that they'll continue to improve from the standpoint. Not the reason that we lost. Certainly, I think if they were impactful from a pass rush standpoint, that could have changed the game. But I think, look, we also have a lot of depth in that group. So I think over the course of the year, especially in longer games, I think that's going to show itself a little bit more. You ideally won't see our defense breaking down, whereas you might see that from some other teams. So obviously need a better pass rush. It was disappointing. I was expecting the pass rush to be better, but I don't want to overreact. I think this still could be a good unit.
Yeah, I thought they won the line of scrimmage for the better part of this game. Miami was one of the top rushing offenses in the country. ESPN covered that on the broadcast, and they brought back a lot on their offensive line. So there's no reason why Miami fans should be expected to be bottled up in the run game. And that's exactly what happened, just 0.6 yards per carry before contact. So really no consistent push, only one run longer than 8 yards in this game for Miami's rushing attack. And they stuck with it. They ran the ball 37 times. I think this is one of those games where, Notre Dame has done this to teams a ton over the last decade where, the run game is kind of just keep bending the defense. And then by the third, fourth quarter, you're just opening up the run game. And that's what Miami clearly tried to do with Cristobal. Kind of really win in the trenches. They ran the ball 37 times for just 3.4 yards per carry. Really only one chunk run beyond 8 yards. I thought the defensive line held up really well. The depth showed. Moments you'd love to see a little better for sure, especially in the pressure in that passing game situation. Just weren't able to get after Carson Beck in this one. I'm willing to chalk this up to, I think that's Miami's strength. They've got 4 guys likely getting drafted in the NFL on that offensive line. Not the night you'd want to see again for the defensive line, but I'm willing to say this was strength on strength, and it was a pretty even match. They didn't get beat up, but they didn't beat Miami back either. And you got to live with that. So I thought, any of the kind of criticism of the defensive line, I think is probably missing some game context and opponent context. I thought overall advanced stats said a pretty good job. Mike, do you feel like we now need so let's step back from this game. This one's behind us. We're 0-1. We got it. But in the 12-team playoff era, do you feel like there's now pressure that like A&M is a must-win game? Notre Dame has to run the table from here. We have to go 11-1. How does this change your perspective for the season?
The cushion for sure has shrunk considerably. I think that if we lose at Texas A&M, we'd be 10-2. You can definitely get into the playoff at 10-2, but it's not a guarantee. So if I look at last year, there were 7 teams that got in with 2 losses. One got in with 3 losses. Now, granted, 3 of those had their second loss in a conference championship, but still, there is a precedent here. We're seeing a precedent that 2 losses can get in. But at the same time, not every team that had 2 losses got in, right? So Miami and BYU, those are examples that didn't get in. Granted, they had a bad end of the year, losing 2 or 3 to end the year. So I think basically the answer here is if you lose one, another one, you probably can still get in, but you don't know that for sure. So if we want to control our own destiny, yeah, we basically do have to win out, just because we're not going to have a whole lot of opportunities to notch marquee wins. We have Texas A&M. Maybe USC will end up being better than we're thinking. Maybe Arkansas will be good, but as of right now, that's not where they're projected. So I think Texas A&M it's wild to say because it's only a few weeks into the season, but it's really our last opportunity to nab an impressive win. And I think if we do that and we run the table, look, a home playoff game is still on the table. I think we could still put ourselves in a position to do that. A first round bye, that's going to be a little bit tougher, not impossible. So I think if you want to achieve those, you obviously have to win out. And if you want to make sure that you control your own destiny, that's another element for why you have to win out too.
Yeah, I don't view A&M as a must-win game. Last year, there were 7 teams got into the college football playoff with 2 losses, and 1 got in with 3 losses. So 8 of the 12 teams had 2 or more losses. Now, 3 of those, the second loss came in a conference championship, and I think the committee kind of looks past those conference championship losses, as I think they should. I think that's fair. But that still means 5 of the teams that got in had 2 or more regular season losses. And there were only 2 Power 4 teams that had 2 losses and didn't get in. And that was, interestingly, Miami and BYU. Both of those teams lost 2 of their last 3 games to end the year. They really sputtered out down the stretch. Um, so, of course, I think the odds get much, much tougher if Notre Dame doesn't beat Texas A&M. I mean, then you for sure have to run the table. And we talked about it. Notre Dame's schedule is not very difficult after these first 2 games. So, good chance we can run the table, but also may not have another top 25 opponent. So, Notre Dame being, a 2-loss team that wins 10 in a row, but did beat a top 25 team. Like, how's that look in the committee's eyes? Don't know, but certainly would put a lot of pressure on it. So, I don't view it as a must-win game, but we said it from the start. There was a 50-50 shot that Notre Dame was going to go 2-0 to start the year. Um, that's now playing out, right? Like, this was a really tough spot for Notre Dame to be in with 2 tough opening game matchups. But I don't think Notre Dame fans should now go into this as like the entire season is on the line against Texas A&M. There's definitely a path to get there with 2 losses, but certainly a huge matchup coming up in South Bend. If Notre Dame beats Texas A&M, I think we are right back in position to make the college football playoff. If we lose, it's going to be an uphill climb. One other way to look at this, the Athletic, puts out projections for the college football playoff, and they've got Notre Dame at the start of the year as having a 76% chance to make it. I think that was third highest behind Oregon and Ohio State. We still have a 63% chance. And that's about what our odds are to beat Texas A&M. Most of the prognosticators are saying a 65 to 70% chance. I think what that really means is if we beat Texas A&M, we are squarely back in the driver's seat. If we don't beat Texas A&M, yeah, we'll be a dark horse at that point. We'll need to win out, and that is just a difficult thing to do. I don't view this, though, as like a, make or break, season is over because of this Miami game. I also wouldn't feel that way even if we lose to A&M. Certainly not as good, not for how good this Notre Dame team looked against a really, really tough opponent. Mike, last thing, big picture here. Marcus Freeman, I believe this was his 10th or 11th loss as Notre Dame's head coach. How do you feel about grading out Freeman and the coaching staff here after this loss?
It's just one game. I think at this point, certainly this coaching staff has earned the benefit of the doubt. We talked about Ash. I think that it was fine, right? I'm not going to give him an A grade. I think a B is probably appropriate. As we keep saying, you give up 27 points to what will likely end up being one of the best offenses in the country. I think it's hard to give a bad grade for that. Obviously, we could have schemed more pressure, bigger impact plays. But I think that's we're getting a little more nitpicky. When we focus on points like that. On offense, we talked about this as well. I think Denbrock's approach to be conservative with Carr early, I think that made a lot of sense. And again, I think it's like the point that you could make is perhaps we could have taken the training wheels off a little bit earlier. But again, you're kind of splitting hairs there. Then you're kind of rolling the dice with potentially your first time starting quarterback getting rattled, and if that happens, then look, you're totally screwed. And as we talked about before, where some of our more notable players like Love, Price, and Greathouse didn't get as many touches, we also talked about like why the flow of the game kind of limited that. Why, when you look at what the opposing defense was giving the looks that they did, why those guys weren't giving as many carries. So I think when you look at the context of the flow of the game, the context of the situation, like the talent of the other team that we were playing, look, I think the coaching staff did okay. We didn't win, so I can't give them a good grade, obviously, but it's certainly nothing that makes me concerned about this coaching staff long term. I think Freeman, and from a head coaching standpoint, I think Freeman had the team in a position to where they responded and they didn't give up. They got back into the game, and we certainly had opportunities to win this game. So the team certainly showed resilience. That goes directly to the head coach. There were certainly moments with Brian Kelly in the past where there were big games where the team just like completely didn't show up. Granted, usually that was against teams like that were true title contenders, which I don't know that Miami necessarily is that. Although they certainly are a college football playoff contender. So I think look, I think my outlook is generally the same. I think it's a tough loss. Uh, yeah, of course it stings. Of course I wanted to win, but there's enough here for me to feel some optimism moving forward. And I think that that's for me that's I would say that's my main takeaway coming out of this.
I think there's so many moments, especially in the Brian Kelly era, as Notre Dame kind of rose back to prominence, where every loss felt like a referendum. That was a word Pete Sampson used to describe, and I thought it was a really good word choice found in this game. This was not a referendum on Notre Dame football, or on Marcus Freeman, or on Chris Ash, or on Mike Denbrock, or on any other player on that roster. This was a hard fought game, and we lost. And what's also stood out to me is Marcus Freeman has this program in every single game. Yes, Stanford, NIU, Marshall, we got to bring them up. But even those were all one score games. Marcus Freeman has never lost a game by more than 13 points as a head coach. His average margin of defeat is 7 points. And of the 4 games that were double figures, I believe all but Ohio State last year was a one score game with the ball in the fourth quarter. So, like, we are in every single game that Freeman loses. And when it's on the road with a first time quarterback against a top 10 opponent in a hostile environment in prime time, look, you're like, there's a reason we had a 55% chance to win this game. There's a reason the post game win expectancy, according to Bill Connolly of SP Plus, was Miami wins this game 51% of the time. If those same exact plays play out over and over and over and over again, it was a coin flip, and Notre Dame lost the coin flip. That's one play here, one play there is the deciding factor in this game. But Freeman's team was there, ready to go. We are over losing to bad opponents. And very clearly early on in Marcus Freeman's tenure, his first game was going on the road at Ohio State and losing a close game by 11, where really Ohio State had a touchdown late to seal it. Otherwise, Notre Dame was right in that game, had a lead in the fourth quarter. And then we came back a month or two later and blew the doors off of a top 10 Clemson team. So very early on, Freeman has made it clear, hey, we can't win the big game. But we're 11-10 in games decided by 13 points or less. Like, when games are close, Marcus Freeman's a 50-50 coach because everyone is. Like, that's what happens in close games. So my big takeaway is to, pull on one of my favorite all-time football players, Aaron Rodgers. I think ND's got a RELAX. Relax, breathe. It was a great game. Enjoy a really great college football game, and now get pumped up for Texas A&M because it's a huge matchup. My last thought is not putting too much weight into game one. We just don't have a lot of data. For all we know, Miami might suck and Notre Dame might suck. I don't think so. Like, the data would tell you that's probably not the case. But it doesn't take us too long to go back to 2016. Notre Dame plays Texas in the opener, loses a barn burner 50-47 in double overtime, and everyone's saying Texas is back. Notre Dame is like looking great, like two amazing teams. Notre Dame went 4-8 that year, and Texas went 5-7. The next year, Notre Dame's coming off of a 4-8 campaign, and I believe it was the second game of the year. We have an instant classic against Georgia. Lose by 1 point, 20-19. I think George Pickens had the game-winning touchdown in the corner of the end zone. Don't quote me on that one, but I'm sure someone can fact check me. We go on to finish 11-3 and finish number 11 in the AP poll. Georgia goes 13-2 and is the number 2 team in the country with the famous overtime loss to Tua Tagovailoa and the Alabama Crimson Tide in the championship game. So they're a play away in an overtime loss in the championship. Who knew after that game, and Notre Dame coming off a 4-8 campaign, that those two teams would both be top 11 in the country? So my gut tells me this Miami team is really good. My gut tells me this Notre Dame team is really good. But we're going to need a few more data points to really be able to assess, hey, was our offensive line getting pushed around by Miami? Like, what in the world? Miami's defense, they're still average. Was this, lack of pressure from our defensive line because Miami might have a Joe Moore Award offensive line? Or was it really just like, oh, yeah, no, our defensive line just isn't as good as we thought we were? We don't know that yet. And so I think for Notre Dame fans right now, take this one in. It was a really fun, awesome environment. It was a gritty comeback effort. It sucks when we come up just short, but just because we made the title game last year doesn't mean we win every single one of the coin flip games. I'm really excited for A&M. I'm really excited for the rest of this season. I don't think anything about this Miami game changes that viewpoint for me.
Totally agree. I think it's you gotta. I think that call out on just not knowing anything. I think that's so important. The Texas is back. That is the example that I always think back to remind myself that we really know nothing at this point. And like CJ Carr, look, I thought he looked really good, but if who knows, like we could get to the middle of the season, it's like, oh, actually that Miami secondary is maybe the worst in the entire country, and that might that might change my opinion a little bit. But of course, I think for any first time starting debut, even if Miami secondary ends up not being good, I think I'll still find it impressive. But it's just it's hard to know exactly who's who at this point. I'm still optimistic. I'm with you, Brett. I think both these teams are good. We don't know that for sure. There's a lot to look forward to. Yeah, look, I think, and I think like one other final thought I have here is if like I like the trajectory of this team. I think especially with CJ Carr, I think there's definitely an element here where we're looking back and we're either 11-1 and 10-2. The offense is really taking off, and we're looking pretty dangerous come playoff time. Like that is definitely a scenario that feels possible to me, where we're kind of peaking at the right moment. Look, I'm not gonna say that that's definitely going to happen, but it feels like a plausible scenario that could play out this season. So I would say try not to let this one hurt too much. It definitely hurts, but try to think about the path that we could potentially have this season, which is definitely still in front of us.
Absolutely. Well, thanks for hanging in there with us, Irish Nation. Not the way Notre Dame was looking to start this year, but a lot of reason for optimism with Freeman, Carr, Love, the rest of the Notre Dame fighting Irish here in 2025. And until we're back to preview the Texas A&M game, Irish beat Aggies.
Irish beat Aggies.